Welcome everybody. We're here today to announce the United Australia Party candidate for Fisher. I'd like to introduce Australia's next Prime Minister, the Federal Leader of the United Australia Party, Professor Clive Palmer.
We are one, but we are many, and from all the lands on earth we come, we share a drink and sing with one voice. I am, you are, we are Australian.
I'd like to thank 300,000 Australians who have hit on our website since we launched the party last Friday. I'd also like to thank the 65,000 Australians who took time to vote on the MSN9 news poll the very next day, where 30% of all people in this country decided to vote one for the United Australia Party. And 4 days later, after we had a time to get our policies out, I'd like to thank the people that participated in the Gold Coast Bulletin poll, tens of thousands of Queenslanders that voted 40% for the United Australia Party and said that's how they'd vote in the next federal election. But then 3 days later in Sydney, all the people who rang up the John Law's program, and 70% of them endorsed me for Prime Minister of Australia. So today is a big thank you to all of them. I'd also like to say that we're standing because we believe that taxes in this country should be lower, that they should release the energy and enterprise of all Australians. We've seen overnight Abbott and Gillard get together to decide that taxes in this country will be raised yet again. And you know what's wrong? Abbott and Gillard are one and the same person. It doesn't matter how many times you turn and move the pieces on the chessboard, you get the same policies. And we are to believe today that our economy is the best in the world. We've never had it so good. Ask the unemployed people of the Latrobe Valley in Victoria. Ask the people of the Hunter district in Newcastle. And ask the unemployed family in Elizabeth in South Australia. And you have to ask all of the Tasmanians. They know they've been forgotten. But the message of the United Australia Party is that help is on the way and we'll be there as soon as we can. I just want to say it's great to be standing for the seat of Fisher on the Sunshine Coast. And over the years I've lived a very itinerant life all around the world. I've kept a home at Coolum. I've always come back there. I've always regarded Coolum as being my home. That's why I bought Palmer Coolum Resort. That's why I want to stimulate the growth of this region and make it happen. A journalist said to me in Sydney last week, you can't have a Prime Minister coming from the Sunshine Coast. And I said, why the hell not? Because we're all Australians, we're all together, and that's what we'll do. I just want to say before I talk about Fisher, why we're here today, talk about endorsing the bill and what we're doing. I just want to talk a little bit about Ted O'Brien, my candidate in the coming election. Well, I want to call upon the Liberal National Party to take his endorsement away because it's a great insult to the people of the Sunshine Coast to have a professional lobbyist standing against you. Ted O'Brien, the Managing Director of a former major lobbyist firm who is jettisoning their hair, represents all that's wrong with Australian politics. If you've got the money, it doesn't matter who's in power, they'll do what you want them to do. So that's, I think, would be better and more respectful to the people of the region that they didn't have to vote for a lobbyist when it comes to this election. Because you know, lobbyists operate this way. They employ ex-minister of the Labor Party and an ex-minister of the Liberal Party. If you've got $1 million like I have, I can go along to the lobbyist firm and I'll get done whatever I want to get done. And I'll get value for my money and that's why I'll come back. But that's not what's good for this country. That chimes away the democracy that we all enjoy. And my family has got a strong commitment to Australia. I lost my uncle in the Great War, my great uncle. 5 of us fought in Papua New Guinea, some of us on the Kokoda Trail. And of course my nephews are still recovering from the Vietnam War. And my other nephew will be standing in this election, Squadron Leader Martin Brewster, served with Indefended Teammate War. All those people have given more service than I could ever offer the nation. So I think the need is there that we need to reclaim that government for the people of this country, and I'm happy to do all I can to do it. We're here today to endorse the candidate, Bill Schoch, who is standing for Fisher. Sorry, my comments earlier were about Fairfax, where I'm standing. We're now talking about Fisher. And Bill Schoch's an outstanding individual. He's someone that I've known for the last 30 or 40 years. He's educated at the University of Queensland. I'm not taking notes, I'm not being advised by lobbyists, I know it to be true. He's a character impeccable to none. You know, it doesn't matter how much money you've got in this life. What's more important than money is the content of your character. And I'm nowhere near as rich as Bill Schoch when it comes to that. He's a person of great integrity who's come to live on the Sunshine Coast. He's played a leadership role in Parliament Resort. You know, it would have been easy to just shut down the resort and sell off the real estate and get rid of that and take the money, and that's what the lobbyists would do and the people that employ them. We were faced with a situation in Coolum where we had 1,000 people working in a place that only could really support 250. We could have said, scrub the lot, who cares less about the Sunshine Coast? But you had someone like Bill Schoch that went in there and did a job when it had to be done to save 250 families, to provide leadership for the future and for expansion. We've got two people running this country that have been professional politicians for over 30 years. They don't really care about the community. And you know, if you're cooking something for a long time, you know what rises to the top. And that's what we've got in Australia. It makes no difference who they are. We have to change this country at the grassroots. We've got to do it at a community level. And that's why we're here today to talk about Bill Schoch. I'd just like to introduce you all to the United Australia Party candidate for the federal seat of Fisher, Bill Schoch.
We celebrate and sing with one voice. I am, you are, we are Australian.
Ladies and gentlemen, today's press conference is being held on the traditional land of the Gubbi people, and we acknowledge them as traditional owners of this land. The escape exits are there and there, should we be. I'm humbled, yet excited to be endorsed as the candidate for Fisher. Why am I standing? 4 reasons. Firstly, if elected, I can make a difference. If elected, my lifetime of service to others will simply continue to my constituents in Fisher. Secondly, our inspirational party leader, Professor Clive Palmer, has, by his actions, inspired me to choose to stand. I have known Clive for 40 years and have a very good working relationship with this remarkable man, who, it must be said, is a hard but fair-minded man. I vouch for the man as a person of good character and a man of principle and values. Clive Palmer is an absolute force of nature, driven for the good of this nature, this nation that we all love. Thirdly, I believe in the policies of the United Australia Party. Australia has the people and the intellectual capital to perform better, and will do so under a United Australia Party government led by Professor Palmer. Increasing the size of the cake, the prosperity in the nation is the way forward. UAP policy unlocks the barriers to prosperity. Fourthly, Sunshine Coast voters can be assured this time, after the election in September, their voices will be heard and acted upon if Fisher and Fairfax are one. We need a new international airport. The Australian government needs to fund it. We can revitalise tourism, the construction industry and the university sector. I will fight for the people of Fisher. We need jobs, we need investment, we need a better government. I am standing because I can make a difference. I am inspired by a federal leader. I believe in the policies of the United Australia Party, and Sunshine Coast voters will have strong representation in Canberra. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and we'll take questions.
Any questions there?
Mr. Farmer, you described Mr. Schoch as having impeccable character. Is it the same Mr. Schoch that wasn't allowed to be a company auditor for 5 years and was ordered to pay costs after an asset investigation?
Well, I don't know, but we know that Bill Schoch has never had any conviction recorded against him in a court of law, and that's very important because many Australians have and should be given other opportunities. So allegations and hearsay, I'm sure that there'll be a lot thrown at us and thrown at me. You'll see that no one attacks our policies, they just attack our people. And you don't want to play the man. I'm important, Mr. Schoch's not important, but our ideas are. Governments will come and go, but ideas go on forever. So while you choose to attack Mr. Schoch or attack me, that's fine. But why not try to think about what we stand for?
No, it wasn't an attack. But
That's
it
all right.
was an attack. And it wasn't hearsay, it was an asset investigation.
Well, well, asset
But there's
investigation.
plenty of other candidates in this electorate.
Well, that's not a question I've answered. Any more questions? Any more questions, anybody?
There's plenty of other candidates.
That's all
A
right, thanks.
question for both of you. Where do you stand on upgrading the Bruce Highway to Brisbane to 6 lanes?
Well, it's a disgrace to the Bruce Highway. It needs to be upgraded straight away because it takes you so long to get up here and so long to go back. But what it needs is federal funding. It needs a lot more input. The Queensland government tells us they're broke all the time, but we need to have Queensland as a priority. There was a time when this state led the nation in economic growth and economic jobs, and that's gone. We're now at the bottom of the sleep, so the federal government needs to look at the potential that exists in this state and unlock it. And that's what we'll do. We certainly agree with that. I think Bill agrees with that.
Absolutely.
Mr Palmer, what's your response to the constituents of Fairfax and Fisher who may be concerned your business interests in the area will be put ahead of the community?
Well, my business interests in the area don't make any money. They lose money all the time. They're only here because I like the place. I want to live here, to be honest with you. But I'm not in business. I'm in politics. I'm standing for Prime Minister. So my business interests are not a concern to me whatsoever.
If the UAP forms government, will you look at changing land clearing laws in regards to dunes and coastal areas?
I think we should say clearly that our policies are the same as those of the Liberal National Party right across the board, with the exception of 5 areas. I'll just go through those 5 areas quickly so you understand our differences. Firstly, we don't believe you should have paid political lobbyists in positions of power in any political party. For example, the Liberal Party's Vice President is Mr Santos Santoro, and the President is also a registered lobbyist, so we think that's bad. So if you believe there should be lobbyists running government, vote for Tony Abbott or vote for Julia Gillard. We abolish that situation. Secondly, we want to get rid of the carbon tax, and not just from when we were elected, but from when it was introduced, because it's a bad tax. Your carbon price in Europe at the moment is $3, the carbon price here is $23. So whatever you think, Australian companies should be at disadvantage with their competitors. But we don't want to get rid of it when we're elected, we want to get rid of it from day one. We think it's appalling that Australian families have to pay between $6,000 and $10,000 for their electricity every year. We think that's too much. We've got to listen to the people and come up with a better solution. Maybe look at some alternative power sources to do a whole things like that, but the current status quo is just not acceptable. If you go to the Latrobe Valley in Victoria, there's 25% of it has been thrown out of work because of this. You'll understand how that affects families. Thirdly, we believe in taking the mineral wealth that exists in this nation, in Queensland and Western Australia, rather than selling ore for $40 a tonne. We believe we should be sending some of that ore to the states like Tasmania, South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales, and having a downstream processing industry using our own minerals. How can it be that Japan, the world's 3rd largest economy, has prospered on Australian resources and Australian energy? How can it be when their wages are higher, their cost of energies are higher, they've got the tyranny of distance? Do we think Australian workers and men and women in this community can't compete? Of course we've got to compete where our advantages are. Fourthly, we believe that 25% of the value generated by a region should be reinvested in this region. When you look at the Sunshine Coast, you look at neglect. Neglect on the Bruce Highway, neglect in relation to our airport, which should be an international airport. We see families being broken up. We see the tourism fragmented. That's what I'm concerned about. I really don't care, personally, what anyone thinks of me, but I do care about the people that live in Fairfax. I do care about the people that live in Fisher. And I've had experience running big corporations and being very successful. The Australian economy is a $1.5 trillion economy. It's run by two people, potentially two people, that have never run a tuck shop. You know, when you're going to put a tender in for an Australian government situation, you add 150%. 50% to pay your tax and another 100% to go to Europe. The government just pays it. It's your money going out the door. Do you think Julia Gillard or Tony Abbott know how to stop that? You have a look at the businesses that we've run, how we've stopped those sort of rorts that go on. And we want to make sure that we get maximum value, maximum bang for all Australians. And it's just not acceptable that we have the highest infant mortality rate in the world in our Aboriginal population. It's just not acceptable that it's been like that for 100 years. If your children were dying, would you be concerned about it? I know I would be. I know I'm concerned about the children that are dying right across this country in the Aboriginal community. We haven't heard about that from Julia Gillard. It hasn't been an issue for Tony Abbott. But why? Because they haven't got a vote. But as far as I'm concerned, if I'm Prime Minister, on day one, that matter will be addressed, because there's nothing more important than the lives of our children. You know, our last difference with the Liberal National Party comes in the policy with refugees. We spend $5 billion every year doing the current policies with refugees, for our Navy to chase people all over the Indian Ocean, to separate husbands from wives and to send children unaccompanied back on planes. Well, what a waste of money. We've talked about the Gonski report. We could take that $5 billion and put it in our education. The Gonski report is a report on the competency of the Prime Minister who is the Minister for Education. That's the reality of it. And what we need to do as a solution is adopt the same policy that applies in Europe and applies in the United States. That if you come to board a plane, if you haven't got a visa, they let you board the plane because you've got a passport and you check in. When you arrive at the airport at your destination, you put a claim in to say you're a refugee or not. Your case is heard. If it's found that you're not a refugee, you're put back on the next plane and out of the country. And we don't have to look after you for a year and a half. And if we have to change legislation, we can do it. Now you imagine if it cost you $800 to come here on a plane and you're not allowed to board the plane, you go to people smugglers who charge you $20,000 and you come in a leaky boat. If the Australian government adopted that policy, there wouldn't be a market for the people smugglers. They're there because of the regulations that we've got. How stupid is that? And you've got a negative policy saying you've got to stop the boats, yet the government's creating the boats. You know public servants get 300% loading if they work on Christmas Island. 300% loading. You want to keep that going as long as you could if you're a public servant. So that's what we stand for, and that's why we're different. Any more questions?
First, what sort of response have you had to the UAP in parts of regional Queensland, and how will you roll out some of those candidates in those regional Queensland seats?
Well, we'll roll them out in the regional Queensland seats, and yesterday we endorsed Rob Messenger for the seat of Hinkler, former Shadow Minister from the LNP, a former Deputy Whip in the State Parliament of the Opposition, and we've rolled him out yesterday here at a press conference in Harvey Bay, and we've got planned on Monday, we'll be endorsing other 6 candidates on the Gold Coast for all of the Gold Coast seats and 1 Northern New South Wales seat. And then later in the week, there'll be more seats rolled out in relation to Brisbane and regional Queensland. There'll be a candidate in every seat in the nation by the end of June or early July. And we have been working on this, not since we made the announcement, but for over a year. We've had plenty of time to vet people, and you'll see some of the biggest names in this country rallying around what we're doing. But you know, the press and other people in the status quo challenge the rights of people to stand. You know, I can say that the United Australia Party is the only party that will get rid of Abbott and Gillard. We're the only people that care about the government of this country. Get that clear. And did 23 million Australians lose the right to put themselves forward for election when Mr Abbott and Gillard was elected to Parliament? People that have been in Parliament for 30 years. I don't like people attacking our right to stand or to field candidates, because I've got a long history with this country. My family's had a strong commitment to Australia. We've lost my uncle in the First World War. 5 of us served in New Guinea. 1 of us on the Kokoda Trail. My 2 nephews are still recovering from the Vietnam War. And my other nephew, Squadron Leader Martin Brewster, led a team in Interfed. Well, you do any of that stuff and think if you're going to worry about Julia Gillard or Tony Abbott, you've got to be joking. And they can ask me any question they like, but we're not taking a back step for anybody, because they fought and died for the freedom and the democracy that we live in, and we're happy to participate in it. Any more questions?
Mr. Palmer, it's only a short time until the election. You're aspiring to be Prime Minister, but you still need to win your own electorate. How are you planning to campaign and get in touch with what the people there really want?
Well, I've been coming to Coolum for 30 years. I know a lot of the people. At Christmas time, for example, we had a free Christmas dinner for 600 disadvantaged people in the community. Part of the Coolum Resort is the largest employer on the Sunshine Coast, and I've been in this region for many, many years, and working here, I know a lot of the people. I'm very confident that we'll win.
How many nights do you think, or days you might spend in the coast up until September 14 living here?
Well,
That's where you're raised.
well, my house is there, and my family's there most of the time, you know. But of course, I live a life where I haven't really got a fixed address, because even when I'm in business for 10 years, I've been in China, Europe, everywhere doing business. Your home is where your heart is. And my heart is on the Sunshine Coast, and my heart's at Park Coolum Resort, and that's where I call home.
There's still a portion of the community that may not exactly know what you're about, though. Are you concerned that'll count against you if you don't spend time there?
No, I'm not concerned about anything, you know. I don't aspire to represent 100% of, to be elected by 100% of people. No election gets 100%, maybe except you're Idi Amin or someone of that calibre. So we can't please all the people all the time. I'm sure I don't please Tony Abbott or Julia Gillard, but I care about their families and their children. I respect them, you know. Politics in this country has been one good against bad. It's been one of division. And yet, you know, we recently celebrated Anzac Day. We didn't send our Anzacs off to die for this country as Liberals or as Labor or Democrats or anything else. We send them as Australians. And that's what it should boil down to. The United Australian Party doesn't disrespect a person because they've got a different political view. Indeed, that's their right, and that's important. And we embrace people from all different sides of politics. What we really want to see is that we can have policies that are more realistic and for the benefit of the whole community. That's what we're about, uniting the country in the things we've got in common, rather than dividing it in the minor issues that we don't agree on.
Would Tony Windsor be a candidate possibly for the UAP? You had dinner with him the other night.
You've got to ask him. I wouldn't preempt anybody. That's a question for him.
Is he someone you'd like to have though as a candidate?
I'd like to have about 23 million people joining the United Australian Party. That's my goal. When I've got 23 million people joining the United Australian Party, I'll stop. Because I'm an Australian, and that's what I care about this country, you know. I represent, personally, not on behalf of the party, but one of the most smallest minority groups in Australia, billionaires. And, you know, it's very difficult being a billionaire because you're held up to ridicule. People make fun of you all the time. But in reality, being a billionaire tells you one thing, what's important in life. You only sleep in one bed, you only have one meal a day. Part of Coolum Resort, you want to have another one. And you only can go out with one woman at a time if you're a smart guy, you know. So anything beyond that is like playing a game of golf, you'll be distracted in life. But I tell you what, I'm not distracted. I want to be Prime Minister of this country because I think I can make a difference. I think there's a need that can be fulfilled, and I'm prepared to offer my services. And if you don't like me, don't vote for me. If you don't like our candidates, don't vote for them. But don't say we haven't got the right to stand as Australians. Don't say that the democracy that people fought and died for in wars for this country doesn't matter. Don't say that, because that's what we stand for. That's what I think is very important to the country.
Question for Mr. Schoch, Mr. Palmer. Will he be resigning if, from now on, or if you do win the election from your position at the resort? Will you resign?
Would I resign?
Will you resign
Of course,
now?
I would go full time for the.
So you won't resign. You'll only resign if you win.
You will resign.
Will resign.
If you win, or as of now?
Well, if the question was if I win, and that is the answer.
Yeah. Let me say this to you. What a joke your question is, really. And maybe a go at you, what a joke it is. The concept is that people can't offer themselves for service unless they give up their job. Now, as soon as you accept that, how many Australians can afford to give up their job just to stand for Parliament, for council, for local government? That's the barriers. The Liberals and the Labor Party say that it's only us. But that takes away the democracy which makes this country strong, that people have fought for. It's not your fault to answer the question, you know. Ask the question. I'm trying to attack the idea behind it, right? And that's an idea you hear all over the place. You have to resign. You know, when the federal fathers drew up our constitution, they envisaged that we'd have farmers, businessmen, a whole lot of normal Australians would come to Parliament, maybe for 1 or 2 terms and go back to what they were doing in their life, because they had something to contribute. We've turned it into a joke, where we've got politicians who leave school, become juniors in lobbyist companies, become a senior lobbyist, then become a staffer, and they get elected for Parliament. And we wonder why the government doesn't know the policies that affect the people. And that's what it's all about, you know. So we want to take politics back to what it was meant to be, where people offer themselves for service. The other side, of course, wants to put the barriers there, because they're scared stiff. You don't see Tony Abbott or Julia Gillard offering to debate policy with me, do you? They'd be too scared, right? Because they wouldn't have their advisors writing little notes to them all the time. You go to Parliament House, there's a little box on the floor of Parliament, right between the table. In that little box sits their advisors, and if Tony Abbott doesn't know what question to ask, they write it on a bit of paper, he gets it. If Julia Gillard doesn't know the answer, the other lobbyist writes it on a bit of paper, then they have a latte together and laugh about what's been happening in Parliament for the day. They then go outside and have a focus group, focus on what's good for you. I think Bill Schoch knows what's good for you better than the lobbyist sitting in a box in Parliament House. Have you got another question?
Yeah, what do you make of Bill Schoch, your opponent, Mal Brough, and how do you intend to defeat him?
Well, that's a good question, but it's really a contest here of ideas. It's the ideas of the United Australia Party and the ideas of of Tony Abbott. Mal Brough will toe the line, and he will just implement the policies of Tony Abbott. So if you want those policies, we'll vote for Mal Brough. That's what I think.
It's true. And of course that's a party that has got lobbyists as their vice president. That's got lobbyists standing for Fairfax, for example, against me. So if you want a party and a government where lobbyists represent you, vote for the Liberal Party. If you don't, vote for Bill Schoch. Anything else?
Mr. Schoch, how will people be able to get in contact with you? Will you be out and about in Fisher? What will they be seeing of you in the coming months?
Yes, well, today's the start of it all. So we'll be setting up our websites and our contact places at present. I'd advise people to go to unitedaustralia.org and register as a member of the party or register for information.
Will there be an electorate office in Fisher?
Yes. Thank you.
You've got to remember the election's quite some time away. The Liberal Party's too scared to announce their policy because the Labor Party might copy it. The Labor Party's too scared to announce their policy because they're waiting to copy the Liberal Party policy. So, yet everyone focuses on us, and we've announced our policy. I've stood here and told you what we believe in, what we stand for. Come on, Julia Gillard. Come on, Tony Abbott. Be brave. Go outside without your lobbyists and see if you can answer our policy issues. Anyway, there was one more question. I think someone had one down here today.
Well, Mr. Palmer, the election last time was a very dirty and personal campaign. How will you be leading up to this year's election with advertising and the like? Will you be joining in that sort of activity?
Well, actually, we don't stand for attacking people. We stand for attacking ideas, which I think is much more effective, you know. Not attacking ideas, and we don't demean a person for having an idea which is different from us. That's their natural right as an Australian. And we respect all Australians that make up our community. So that's not something we would do. I think the issues are far more powerful. Issues like not having lobbyists run the government. Issues like being fair to people, reducing their electricity prices. Issues like doing policies you think are good for the community. I think they'll be effective. The other side might think differently. They might want to attack me because I'm a fat person. You've seen that right across Australia. I'm trying to become a skinny person. I'm a person that's cool in the country. I'm self-conscious, obviously. Being a fat person has affected my life greatly. But I'll be attacked as being a fat person. I'll then be attacked because I've got a lot of money or I'm a millionaire. That's a really relevant point too. You know, what really matters is not those sort of things. What really matters is what's delivered to your families. What really matters is what opportunities you've got. So I hope you'll all join us for a cup of tea and we can have some more talks. Thanks very much. Thank you.